was told what it means to be a man. And now I've reached that age, I've tried to do all those things the best I can. No matter how I try, I find my way through the same old jam. Good times, bad times, you know I've had my share. When my woman left home for a brown-eyed man, I still don't seem to
Hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. And I'm Dave, and I'm here with one of my greatest and oldest friends, Dave.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, I have to also say this. I've been friends with Dave since we were, I would say, 4 years old. We went to the same nursery school together, and there were 3 Davids in the class. There was me, him, and this other David whose last name began with an R. And me and this Dave have the same last initial, M. Am I allowed to say that, or does that ruin everything?
Yeah.
So he became David M. The other David became David R. And somehow they started calling me Davey. And I don't know how that even happened.
I forgot that was the origins of Davey.
Yeah, I don't, because we couldn't both be David M.
Yeah.
You know?
Why me and why not you?
You got lucky.
Yeah.
You know? I think that's why I became a heroin addict, is because I was called Davey my whole life. I think that was like a huge piece. Do you think that's possible?
And I prevailed, and
And you became an incredible success. And this episode, see, Dave, out of all my friends, Dave and I were like brothers, and we had different hobbies and we had different sort of interests, but like we both came from like middle class Jewish families in Manhattan.
yeah, Upper West Side versus
Chelsea.
Are we allowed to say that?
Yeah.
All right.
Please. What do you think about that? Like, for me, like, when I think about all of our friends, you and I came from the closest, the most similar origin out of all of our friends.
And not only that, from teachers. Your parents were teachers. My mom was a teacher. My dad used to be a teacher.
It was, and our households were very different, but at the root, they were very much the same.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and it was that old school time in New York where it was straight up middle class, and New York was kind of a middle class place. I mean, there was tons of super rich people, but it still felt kind of like a middle class place back then. And we were like just those kind of Jewish middle class families.
Well, and also like our parents like got off on being middle class. Like our whole culture was middle class. Like we both like, was your thing rent control or anything?
Yeah.
Like that was like they also had like scams of where they parked the car and we, you know, this place where I grew up, we're at my dad's house in Chelsea right now, but it's, you know, it was the International Ladies Garment Workers Union housing built for middle class, lower class Jewish people.
Yeah.
And both of our parents were like these liberal, well-educated people who were very concerned about Jewish rights or like and Jewish history and like, you know, like how so much of our families have been killed in the Holocaust and this and that. And but being Jewish had nothing to do with us. You know, we were just Jewish. It just was who we were, not like what we believed or anything.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, as someone who's moved away from New York, I didn't understand until I moved away how important that was to our identity. Just being Jewish, because there was so many kids who were Jewish. Even our Filipino friend, it was like he was Jewish. He knows all of the prayers before the drinking the wine and whatnot, and it was just a Jewish culture here. And it's not like that in other places.
Well, it's not necessarily like that in a lot of places in Manhattan either. I bet you if you went to like, humanities or you went to some like hardcore public school, like the Jewish parents made sure their kids didn't go there.
Sure.
Our school was incredibly Asian and incredibly Jewish.
Yeah.
And the elementary school was incredibly Jewish.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was also like it was part of the identity of New York City. It still is, but back then, before all of these different corporate reforms happened and the city changed so much, it was very much middle, upper class Jewish town. And our school was like this experimental elementary school based on liberal Jewish ideas.
Right.
And Dave and I became friends when we were super little, and it was fun.
I think it's worth saying that before the show, we were trying to remember when we actually became friends, and we couldn't really remember. We both had Miss Holder in nursery school, so we were in nursery school together.
You shouldn't say her name. I'm sure she's listening. I'm sure Snowby's listening right now.
Didn't she pass away?
Yes,
Okay.
but she's probably with Chris listening in heaven.
Okay. She would definitely be in heaven.
She definitely wouldn't be listening to Dopey.
But, you know, like we were in school together when we were 4, but we don't remember any of that. The first thing I remember is when we made this terrarium together with Robbie. I don't know what grade it was, 2nd grade or something, in Ron's science class.
What do you remember about that?
I remember being down in the basement, and we were working on this terrarium, which I think was largely driven by Robbie. Robbie loved that kind of thing. And you also, I mean, you had fish, so you also...
I had terrarium. I'd have 3 terrariums at a time in that room.
Yeah.
I would have a desert terrarium with like anoles and cacti, and then I would have a wetlands terrarium with huge bugs, like millipedes and snakes and toads, and then I would have 2 fish tanks at once. That whole room, I had turtle tanks and fish tanks, and that's how me and Robbie became so close in the beginning.
It is, and I felt like you guys sort of indoctrinated me into the ways of
Terrarium life.
Of terrarium life, and it was great. It was like a new thing for me as a kid. I was into sports before that, and it was fun to.
And
get
after that,
and after that, yeah, that was always my thing, and it was fun to get into that. And I remember we were down in that. Remember that basement room, and I remember the girls' locker room was right on the other side of that wall, so you'd hear girls kind of giggling in the background, and that was even in 2nd or 3rd grade. Somehow that was exciting, and that's really all I remember.
What I remember is that the science teacher, I remember he was gay. Was he gay? He seemed gay to me. But maybe that was because he was molesting me, and that's why I became a heroin addict.
No, wait, first of all, that's not true.
No, not true.
But wait. But check this out. I don't think he was gay, because there was a rumor about him being gay, and there was a rumor that he died of AIDS. Do you remember that?
I did.
I know that not to be true because I was a teacher in my 20s, and I went to some like faculty development thing, and the guy who ran it was Ron, was that guy.
So you saw him again?
I saw him.
And what do you have to say for himself?
He remembered you, actually.
No, he
didn't remember me, and he remembered you.
How did that even happen?
Oh, I just, I told him who I was, and he was like, and I was like, yeah, remember me and Dave and Rob? And he was like, oh, yeah, I remember Davey.
He's like, yeah, me and Davey used to make out near the turtle tank. What I remember is that he had like a 70-inch cock. No, he had like a 70-gallon aquarium, huge aquarium on the floor, and it was like really long and thick.
Wait, first of all, if for some reason this guy is listening, he was a super nice guy.
I know. He was very, very like gentle and supportive.
Yeah.
Very, very gentle and supportive.
Oh, man.
But he no, I'm just kidding. If he molested me, I have no recollection of it. But he had.
But it's why you're a heroin addict.
But it's probably why I'm a heroin addict. But he had a gigantic fish tank on the floor. And in the fish tank, there was like a mix. There was a lot of different fish and a lot of different kinds of fish. And what I remember more than anything is that Robbie would take this turtle, and maybe the turtle lived in the tank, and I'm sure Robbie's at home listening to Dopey, like cursing Dopey because we get all the facts wrong. Like he's upset that Jeremy's claimed a story that was his, and he's like, I'm sure he's like getting ready to go crazy. I talked to Robbie the other day. He said he's going to come on Dopey and set the record straight on everything. He said Jim never turned into a black woman when he was tripping. It was just Robbie.
What?
That Jim's stolen Robbie's story. Anyway, what I remember more than anything, and Dopey should not be a show about science and such, but Robbie was so cruel to animals that he would take the goldfish, he would wedge them up against the side of the tank by the tail, and he'd have the turtles bite their heads off. Do you remember that?
I don't, but I can see it.
I remember that, and I remember that this is something that I can't get past, and I probably think about this every week. Literally, every week. I had a motorcycle, okay? And it was a motorcycle that was like a toy motorcycle, and on the back of it, it had this helmet, and the helmet had a cord, and you would pull the cord and it would go, and the wheel would spin. So you go, and you make it go really fast, and then you put it down and it goes really fast, okay? And it was like it was the best toy I ever owned. And in that science room, we would set up jumps, so it would jump over the stupid turtle tank.
I do remember this,
and it got lost, and I never found it. And I think about this to this day.
Definitely in the girls' locker room.
Gone.
Wow.
Gone.
It's also worth mentioning that we were talking about this, but I remember when Robbie swallowed one of your goldfish when it was alive.
And I got really upset, probably.
Yeah, and how could you do that? That's why he did it.
No, but in my recollection of that, he swallowed it, and I got super upset, and he started laughing hysterically, and it popped out when he was laughing into the tank. So it was like, no harm, no foul. That's what I remember.
I'm very excited for Robs to come on and set the record straight in all this.
Well, he will set the record straight. Now, one of the things that happened, Dave and I grew up together. We were the closest of friends, literally from 4. Yeah. Dave was an athlete. He played in Little League. He played in, this thing in New York City called Champions. You played in Champions, didn't you?
Astros.
Whatever. Yeah, he played in Astros. He was an athlete. I certainly was not, and I wish I had been. I think my life would have been much better if I had been. And my dad loved Dave, and Dave was on the basketball team in high school, and every year they would play in this tournament down where I grew up, and my dad would go see Dave, and when he would come home, I would always say, "You wish he was your son, don't you?" And he would get very upset, and I would like to be dramatic about it, and I still say that to him, and I think it's true because Dave went on to being a very successful doctor. And I didn't. I'm a pretty successful waiter and podcast host. Now, we grew up. We went to elementary school. We went to the same school from when we were 4 till we graduated high school, which is pretty unusual.
And we had this tight group of friends with Robbie and Jim, and that we stayed friends with the whole time.
Yeah, and we had a very tight group of friends that we were all friends with from when we were 4 till we graduated high school. And beyond, and we're still friends. I mean, this weekend we all got together.
Yeah.
And Dave actually came out and saw Linda and the baby this weekend, which was super cool.
It was great.
And I went out to Seattle a few years ago and saw Dave's life. And Dave brings his kids home, and it's beautiful. Anyway, Chris started doing drugs when he was young. I think he was smoking crack when he was 14, before football practice. He was taking acid when he was 13. He was drinking.
That's crazy.
We were an incredibly straight bunch of friends. And we didn't do anything. I don't remember doing anything, not even drinking.
Yeah, before 10th grade, I don't think any of us had gotten drunk even. I mean, maybe we had a Zima in 9th grade or something.
I don't remember anything. I remember the first time that I got drunk, and I've talked about it on Dopey, was at the end of summer camp, and I blacked out. I drank 20 screwdrivers, and I blacked out, and I started vomiting, and I was like, I don't like alcohol. And Dave, you would drink at parties or whatever. It wasn't
the first time I ever got drunk was New Year's Eve at Sabrina's house at that party. I'd never gotten drunk before that. I think it's also worth saying that this was, for those who are younger in the audience, in the Dopey Nation, this was a time in New York City, you could go into any bodega, and if you were tall enough to see over the counter, you could buy beer. There was no, checking IDs. It was easy. It wasn't like that was the obstacle for us. We were just straight-laced kids until then.
We were very straight. We liked to, walk around and use our imaginations and make weird movies and play weird pranks and whatever. And but it was very straight stuff. We didn't cause any real trouble for anybody. Although I guess sometimes a couple of us would steal. You would, me and Robbie would always steal. Dave was the best of us. I have to say, you were the best of us.
I'm not. You can't see it, but I'm nodding my head now. But yeah, we were straight kids.
Out of all of us, you and Greg were morally way more upright than the rest of us. And not that we were so much worse,
but no one was doing anything too bad, really.
Well, not then, exactly.
Not at that point, early on, which is, I think, an important note for interesting things that developed later.
Well, so then after I realized I couldn't drink, I had started smoking weed.
But when was the first time you smoked weed? It had to be 11th grade, right?
Yeah, it was like at a party, like it was like a theater party. Like after some production was over, I decided to try smoking pot because I couldn't drink, and I was like, I like this.
Yeah.
This. I said to myself, this is what I'm gonna do at parties.
Yeah.
Like, because I can't drink, I'm gonna smoke pot.
And what was the feeling like that first? I don't know if you remember.
I do remember
the first time. What did you actually feel?
I felt loose.
Yeah.
I felt comfortable. I felt chill. I felt like I wasn't worried about anything. I'm a very anxious person, but like in my soul, I'm not anxious. It was like in these situations at like a party where everybody else gets to be like loosey goosey, I would get very tense if I didn't put something in me.
Yeah.
So like I started to smoke pot, and then like kind of like, you never smoked pot. You were like, I don't want to smoke pot. There was like some sort of like, it was like some sort of fear and some sort of morality around like, this is not what I'm going to do.
Do you remember that there was a morality to it? Did I say something like that? Because I don't remember that part of it. I don't even remember why I didn't, but it's.
I think I might be just projecting, because when Jim would smoke pot and I wouldn't smoke pot, I thought it was a morality thing for me. And I was just like, that's not the right thing
why?
to do.
Because it was illegal, or what was the morality part of it?
I think deep down, I thought that people shouldn't do drugs because they wouldn't actually be themselves.
Yeah, that strikes a chord. I think I probably thought that too.
If you're doing that, you're doing it to be cool. You're not being yourself. It's
right.
Disingenuous. It's not who you are. It's
right.
not who you're meant to be, which is funny because in a lot of ways I've come full circle to that notion.
Yeah.
But I actually had to learn that was actually true, So like, and then like we all graduated high school, and like we were the worst students in our high school. We went to like one of the best schools in the world, and like our group of friends were like pretty much the worst students in the school. And we went to high school or went to college, and Dave went to California to Berkeley, and I went to Ithaca. And I remember when we got to school, I would just be like, we were both miserable where we were. And a lot of it had to do with not feeling like we were a part of anything and not having friends and whatever. And that's when I started smoking weed. That's when my addiction kicked in.
Wait, why did you even go to Ithaca?
They had a good TV program, and I wanted to make TV shows.
Okay.
I wanted to make the greatest podcast in the history of podcasts then. I had a premonition that there was going to be this drug addiction podcast that was going to be the biggest thing ever.
Life comes full circle.
So here we are. So at Ithaca, I totally started doing drugs every day. Started smoking pot every day. Started taking acid, taking pills, and you didn't.
I didn't. At Berkeley, like the druggiest place historically, and I even lived in a co-op where there was a guy growing pot in the basement. There was tons of drugs being done, and I still didn't.
Do you remember like the turn? I mean, like, because I think most of our group of friends started smoking a bunch of pot right. in that moment, or at least Jim and Devin did. And Robbie had started drinking a bunch.
I think Greg did too, a little.
No, I don't think so. Not so much. But do you remember like a turn where like people were doing drugs and you weren't?
Yeah.
And what was that like?
Yeah, at this cost. So I lived in the dorms freshman year. And I had a weird reason. It wasn't like I was the guy who went to California because I had dreams of this California life. I knew nothing about California. I basically went to college in California to try and win back my ex-girlfriend. And I got out there and I was like, what the hell? I don't know anything about this place. There was all these fraternities and sororities. I had never even heard of a fraternity. I was a real sheltered kid, I guess. And
how could you not have heard of a fraternity?
I don't know. But then I started,
I think it was just so unappealing. That idea of this group mentality of these boneheads, like everybody doing the same thing and looking exactly the same, and you would have to do what they wanted you to do so you could be part of it. It's like the worst idea in the world. It's like if you were like them, you'd be like, all right, but it was like you have to be different so they like you, and it's like it disgusted you.
Yeah, it wasn't my thing. Although the funny thing is, I did realize that you could get free food by going to the first week of their little rush thing.
So you took advantage.
Yeah, you get really good meals. For all of you guys going to college, just know that you can get
go to
free
Rush,
food.
Steal their food, and there's probably also a lot of stuff you could steal from their houses. But then they'd probably kill you if they caught you. So
don't do that part.
Be careful
And don't do drugs, kids.
Continue.
Okay, sorry. So anyway, so I moved into the freshman year. I was in this, just dorm, and it was kind of like fratty, and I was unhappy, and then I moved into this co-op house, which is a house with 23 people. It's called the Pax House, and basically everyone in there was doing drugs. Everyone was definitely smoking pot, and there was, a ton of other drugs. I mean, like the first day I walked in, I met this guy, and I was like, "Hey, I'm Dave," and he's like, "I'm Cliff." I mean, Bruno. And I was tripping yesterday, and I had this vision that God told me to change my name, so I changed my name. It was that kind of place, And while everyone was smoking pot around me, tripping, doing the other things, I tried smoking pot, but it didn't make me feel good. It just made me feel kind of paranoid. And a few times, maybe if I just was by myself, maybe it made me feel good. But in social situations, it was the opposite of what happened to you. It gave me that kind of feeling like I couldn't connect with anybody because I was lost in my own head. And so it just didn't feel good. And I still, somehow I always end up, I've had a lot of friends who have been stoners over the years. And even if they're stoned, I still have a good time with them. So there's something about like that culture that maybe I groove with, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work with my chemistry, I guess.
Well, yeah, I think that's a common thing. I mean, you can meet like a ton of drug addicts even who like didn't like weed. Weed isn't for everybody. No. It was for me. What I want to know is what was it like dealing with your friends who like before that we would just hang out and we would hang out, you know what I mean? And then after that when we hung out we'd have to find a way to get stoned. Yeah. Like it was part of the night, and then everybody would be stoned. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like when we were kids we would play video games together like sober all day and all night, and then we come back from college and like half of us need to be stoned in order to do anything.
Yeah, it sucked for me. I hated it. And I just remember feeling like I felt isolated. I felt like no one really wanted to hang out with each other. Everyone just wanted to get stoned and play video games. And then when we were playing video games, it didn't feel like we were connecting in that old school way. And there were other things that I think made me feel isolated, that I had gone all the way out to California. But I remember that sucked for me, and I didn't like it. And it even like doubly made me feel like this isn't a good thing. It's taking my friends away from just the old school way we used to hang out, and we were so close.
Right. I enjoyed, one of the things that I really enjoyed about drugs was like I needed I needed the adventure of like I liked doing the wrong thing, and I liked shoplifting when I was a kid. Like I liked getting away with stuff. You know what I mean? Like I enjoyed like getting away with whatever it was, like cheating or like it was like my moral center. Like I was raised by good parents and I had this good moral center, but when I was a kid, I was such a good kid. You know what I mean? I was so innocent and so pure. But when I started getting away with stuff, I really got off on it, and like I really got off on, stealing, lying, and for me lying started like because my parents were so protective and so controlling. Like they didn't want me to take a specific route home from school. So like, and I didn't want to hear about it from them. So I would come up with a story like in order to get home from school. And like, or like with, I don't remember lying with teachers, but I'm sure I did. I just became like somebody who would lie in order to get through a day. You know what I mean? In order to like explain something, I would lie about it. Like, and it's weird because I'm very much not like that now. And I don't even remember that period because I think that was the pre-doing drugs period. I think like lying was my first drugs, and the second I started doing drugs, I couldn't keep stories straight enough to keep up with lies, so I stopped lying. Because like, or maybe I just hated lying, but like I remember there was a minute where I would lie.
But do you think that was because even though your parents, sort of raised you really well and were good people and had a strong moral compass and all that stuff, do you think you had to rebel because it put you too much in a box and you needed to break out of that in some way and like have a sense of your own control in the world, and the way you could do that was through lying to your parents or lying to whoever, or shoplifting or something like that?
I think I think my parents had expectations of me. Like, I think I had expectations of myself that surpassed my parents' expectations of me in a way. Like, and I think my parents didn't understand the way I saw the world at all. And I think, like, I wanted to be a certain way, and they wanted me to be another way, and I didn't want to hear about it. So I kind of pretended to be their way, or I would go along with what they would say so I could do whatever I wanted. That was a classic early childhood story where my sister would fight with my parents all the time about everything. And she was probably 13, or maybe she was 15, and I was like 10, 11, and we're in the elevator, and she's throwing a fit. And I said, Lori, just do whatever you want and tell them what they want to hear. And that was really how I would lie.
Right.
I would do whatever I wanted and make sure that nobody could fuck with me. And that was what led to my kind of doing drugs.
Yeah.
Getting away with stuff based on I don't like to hear people talk shit to me. And I'm still like that. Like, I do not respond well to like people giving me shit. Like, I'd much rather not hear about it, Anyway, this story, like, it kind of like, it gets kind of really crazy. It all amps up because, I mean, my drug use really ramped up after that. I became, as soon as I was done with freshman year of school, I was smoking weed every day. I was taking whatever drugs I could get my hands on, whenever I could get my hands on them. And Dave, like, we were hanging out the other day, and he was telling me this story about setting up like a basketball camp in California in this nice summer. And I was like, what was I doing? And Dave was like, you were probably doing drugs. And it's like, and it's true. Like, every minute, as soon as I found drugs, every minute I wanted to do them. And you did the opposite. And this is where the story takes this terrible turn. Terrible turn. And Dave, it was the end of school. Was it the end of school? No, you tell the story.
No. All right. Well, I guess the timing of this would be, I don't know. Okay. Well, we'll start with, I had this girlfriend right at the end of college. This is where it all really kind of begins. Like, the tail end, I met her actually at the party at the last day of college, and we start going out, and then she was from the West Coast, and then she, after some traveling stuff we did, she ended up moving to New York to be with me, and we were living together in Brooklyn. And we lived together for a few years, and then I was starting medical school, and I don't know how to best tell this story.
Dave, I remember Dave was dating this woman, and he called me. I remember I was living on the Lower East Side with Jim, and you called me and you said, I like this girl, and I think she's a stoner. And I was like, well, how much pot does she smoke? And he was like, I think she smokes every day, and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh. And then I didn't meet her for a long time.
Right.
But, like, you came home with her, and me and her met.
Wait, and so this is a big thing, actually. When she moved to New York, she didn't really know people here. And so I was like, I want to introduce you to all my good friends, because these are, like, my, like, these are like my brothers in the world, and it was important because like I wanted her to have friends too, or maybe she had one friend here, I can't remember, but she was. It's hard, like you move to a new place, you don't know people, and I think another backdrop to this is like that. Aside from the story we're about to go into, that our friendship was already, we were struggling, or I was struggling anyway. I'll say it from my perspective, because you were addicted to heroin, and it was really hard to be friends with you then. It was, I'd come over, I'd started playing guitar, so we'd play some guitar together, and that was fun. But you were like, it was hard to get a hold of you. You'd never call me back. Like, I seem to remember. I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correctly. There were times when you were maybe trying to quit a little bit, and I was trying to like be really excited and help you with that, but you weren't really ready to quit, and that was really hard. And there's just a lot of hard, like it was hard because I was worried. I was just like worried about you. And it was just hard to be, like a straight guy or, someone who's not doing drugs with someone who's addicted to drugs. That's a hard dynamic to bridge.
And the transition from being a stoner to being a heroin addict was
right.
a very sharp change. And I think my personality changed.
Yeah.
And my behavior changed. And like, if you're listening and you're a heroin addict, the way you change. You lose patience. You lose the ability to be a friend. I think you can't be bothered with anything unless you're high, and then when you are high, it's not real. And so we had drifted apart, but our friendship, our group of friends, was still as strong as ever. But it was also just, we were all like young men trying to have lives and careers and whatever. And at the time, like, my career was doing well. Like, I was like making inroads into TV, and like, and I had that nice apartment, but I was a heroin addict, and Dave had this girlfriend, and I hit it off with his girlfriend immediately, and like there wasn't any kind of like spark at first, as much as like I was like, she's cool, whatever, and like, but she was a stoner, and it was like very comforting to meet somebody who smoked pot. And I remember she like would drink Coke, and I would drink Coke, and she smoked Marlboros and I smoked Marlboros, and it was just like this thing. Like, it was like we had a lot of weird habitual things in common.
So I think I want to go back to that part in a sec, because there's some of this, like, I don't actually know some of this part, the backdrop, but I think it'll help the listeners if I tell what the next part of the story.
Tell as much as you can.
All right. So I'm at this point in my life where it was the year before medical school. I had taken this year. I had been a sixth grade teacher, and then I stopped teaching, and I got into medical school, but I deferred. So I had this whole year that was awesome. It was like this incredible year where I got really into playing guitar. I was doing capoeira and improv comedy. It was like I was just riding high, photography, all this great stuff. And me and this girlfriend were living together, and it was like our relationship was such that she didn't really demand anything of me, and I was out at all hours, going to weird like bluegrass shows in the West Village till 4 a.m. I was doing whatever I wanted, and she never really asked anything of me. And I was a young kid, like I wasn't really paying attention enough to our relationship probably, and she wasn't saying anything. So I sort of thought everything was all good in our relationship. And then I had this friend come stay with me, and I remember she said, this friend Ben came to stay with me from L.A., and he was trying to be an actor here, and she said to me, I can't be in the house while you have this friend over. I'm going to go stay at my boss's house in wherever, up at Columbia University or something. He's away. And I was like, all right, I guess.
Why couldn't she stay there then?
She said because, like, there was no, it was a small New York City apartment. She was like, there's no, like, I don't have any privacy here. She was trying to do some writing and submit some writing stuff to magazines. And I was kind of like, okay, it seemed weird to me, but I was kind of, I was just doing my thing.
You were oblivious.
I was oblivious, and I was really focused on my thing. And, don't get me wrong, like, we had, like, good interactions. It wasn't like we had a bad relationship. It was just like we weren't, like, really interfacing enough.
Well, it was interesting because, like, Jenny, she was, you were both, like, she was, like, this very much free spirit, hippie person, but her hippiness was more how she ate how she dressed,
Right.
you know, that she smoked weed every day.
Which is
that,
weird.
That she smoked cigarettes every day, that she listened to, you know, psychedelic music and jazz. And you were actually like crazy hippie in that you actually pursued anything you wanted to do. You know what I mean? You would do photography. You would try to learn guitar. You would go to do capoeira. You were doing all of these things, you know, that traditional hippies would do. But these hippies of our age, like I was like a hippie and all I would do was smoke weed and eat and watch TV.
Right.
And I'd be like, what? I'm a hippie.
Right.
You know, but it was like, so it was like this kind of like similar ideology that wasn't carried out the same way. And I think she was actually I know that she was very lonely and depressed.
Right.
And she was like getting wasted every day.
Right.
And, you know, and I hung out with her very little, but it wasn't, then you started going on these trips. You went on some trip to like Virginia to find a banjo or a banjo teacher or something.
I actually took her car and I drove down to Virginia. I played hooky that was when med school started. I played hooky from med school for a few days, I think. And I was getting into bluegrass and I started playing banjo. And I was just like, Virginia's where people play banjo. So I went to find bluegrass banjo farmers, or I don't know. I found some old dudes and it was great actually. But
meanwhile, though, she was incredibly alone and I was incredibly alone. I was fucking totally addicted to heroin on 24th Street by myself. And I remember one night she calls me up and she says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." You know what I mean? And she goes, "Well, can I come over and hang out?" And I said, "Sure." And she just, you know, she wasn't looking to come over and have sex with me. She wanted to come over and like have a friend.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, I was like, so she came over and I think we smoked pot and like maybe I even gave her some heroin. You know, like that's very possible. And like, and nothing happened. But it was like just to have like, I was incapable of having some close friendship with a girl that was somebody else's girlfriend without thinking about doing something. It's just not the way I was wired, you know? And I was attracted to her. But like, you were like my brother, and I was on heroin, and she was lonely, and it was like a million fucking things. And she wound up, I think we kissed for a second, you know, like there was something, and I was like, "Get out of here, you gotta go," blah, blah, blah. And she leaves. And that was like the seed was planted,
right?
You know, and then you went on some other trip to like the Far East, to like Korea or Japan or someplace.
What?
Did you go to some Asian country?
I did go
Thailand.
I did, but
Vietnam.
Wait, that was 1997 when I went. Was that the right timing?
Yeah.
No, that was too early.
Where else did you travel to in that period?
I don't know. I can't remember.
You went on some other long trip, and I had gotten a job delivering weed around the city,
right.
And I was very lazy, and she had a car. And I ran into her one day while I was delivering weed, and she goes, "Do you want me to drive you around?" And I was like, "Yeah, that would be great." So I started getting spoiled, and when I would work, I would call her and be like, "Do you want to drive me around? I'll get you high." She was like, "Fine." And we would drive around, and I would deliver weed, and we became friends. You know what I mean? And me and her hit it off immediately. Like, we became really close. And then you went on some other trip, some long trip, and she was very depressed, and she came over. She called me like at night, and she's like, "Can I come over?" And you were away, and we wound up having sex.
Right.
And as soon as we had sex, I like lost my mind, and I said, what I said was, "You have to leave Dave, and you have to tell him that we had sex, and you have to move in here." And that's the only way that it can be right, is the way that I had imagined it. Because if we had just had sex, and then she went back to you, like, I don't know, I couldn't live with it.
Right.
You know, for whatever reason, I couldn't live with it. And she was like, and I was a heroin addict, you know, and she was like, "I don't think that that's a good plan for me to move in with you." And I said, "Well, that's what it has to be, you know." And I think she stayed with me for a few days while you were away.
That's when she was probably telling me she was staying with her boss or something. Because what happened, what I remember next is that she called me and was like, let's meet or something. And this is where I knew something was wrong. Like, things just didn't feel right. But when you're in that position, and I was in this position where I had all these other things. At this point, I'm in medical school. It's, I guess, 1999, 2000, something.
No, it was way before that. It was this all happened 98.
Yeah,
99.
It was 99 and 2000.
Yeah,
because I was a first year,
and that's where my life really fell apart.
And because here I was like diving into medical school, and like it's medical school is like all encompassing in a lot of ways, and I was trying to maintain other things, playing guitar, whatever, and
this relationship,
sort of like yes, but I wasn't like paying enough attention to it, but at this point I clearly knew something was wrong. So we meet in Tompkins Square Park. I remember this. And it's at nighttime. We're sitting on these benches, and there's I think it's the basketball court where there's the chain link fences. I remember we're sitting right by that on those like New York City benches, with the old wood slats and the stone thing. And I remember she said, I have to tell you, I don't remember the word she used, but it was something like, I'm with someone else, or I something like that. And I would, my heart dropped out, and it was the craziest fucking feeling I've ever had, and like for some reason I wasn't even thinking. I was assuming in that moment it was someone I didn't know, but for some reason I just said to her the only thing I could think of to say, because I was so fucking bewildered and like floored by it, was who are you with? And then she was like, Dave. And then like my head fucking spun around, I was like, went for like 16 more loops. And I just remember like grabbing the chain link fence and like screaming at the top of my lungs. And Tompkins, it's like something out of a terrible movie. And
it was like that. It was like the worst thing that could ever happen.
It was the worst. It was like first the worst thing, like when your girlfriend tells you that she's with someone else, and then it's your, like your brother, essentially your best friend. So yeah, and then a crazy fucking stuff ensued after that. I mean, I don't know how. Like, what do you remember of?
I remember,
like, that's not the end of the story,
Well, what I remember was, first of all, like my heroin use like tripled because my benzo use went crazy high. Like I'm just because I couldn't live with this fact.
Yeah.
I think soon after that, I don't know if I had already lost my job at that point, if I had been to detox at that point, like where I was in my addiction. I think I had. No, I think I might have still been working. And then I think she wound up leaving town. But what I remember is she moved in with me. And then I think the trauma of all of this, it was incredibly stressful and painful for all of us. And she got really sick. She got really, really sick, and she checked herself into the hospital.
Yeah, she was at St. Vincent's Hospital.
Yeah. She wound up, and she was white. Remember, she was white as a ghost, and she was incredibly skinny and little and sickly in a way.
Yeah.
That's just like how she was. And she got so sick, and then we went to visit her separately, and we ran into each other there. And I remember standing outside of St. Vincent's. I remember staring at this fire hydrant, trying to explain to you what had happened, trying to apologize, but trying to just say this is what happened, and I don't know what to say about it, and I know it's not right, but I don't remember like what came out of my mouth.
You remember that I picked up a trash can and threw it on the ground, and you thought I was going to throw it at you?
No, I don't remember it. I was on drugs. I don't remember.
But even before that, I remember that well, and that was like a crazy. Like maybe that was the first time we saw each other since the whole thing went down, and that was
the first time we saw each other.
Crazy fucking feeling, and but what even before that, I don't know if you remember this, but she came back to me, and she was like, she was crying and was like, I don't know what to do. Like maybe I should stay with you. She was so confused. And, and I was in a crazy state. You obviously were in a crazy state, and you were, on heroin. And I remember you called our place that we lived in, and I answered the phone. And this is maybe like the biggest indication of like where you were at with your addiction at this point. And I picked up the phone, and you were like, give the phone to Jenny. And like, you were basically like, and then like I guess I gave the phone to Jenny, and you were basically like convincing her that she had to leave me, and I was like, the feeling of like, fuck, like this is like my friend, my great friend, and he's just like gone in this world of like need. And what it felt like to me at the time was like, it was the same as the feeling I had when you were trying to get drugs. It was like you were trying to get this, whether it was drugs or
whatever I could do to take myself out of my head.
You were able to bypass like your great friendship to get the thing that like you craved in some way. Not that you were craving her in this like momentary way, but it was a craving of some kind.
It was crazy codependency. It was crazy. If I didn't have her, I was nothing. And if I was going to do this to you and to me, if I was going to betray you, which would be also me totally betraying myself, which it was. I betrayed everything that I believed in. I knew that I had done the worst thing, as far as I could tell. In my life, I rate it as it was the worst thing I ever did in my life until we had the baby and I was using with the baby. Yeah. Then it became the second worst thing I ever did in my life. But like, I knew the second it happened, like how wrong it was. And I knew, I kind of remember that situation, but I was like, I was a drug addict and I was like going to get what I needed, and I was going to get what I needed to be okay. And that was that she was going to be with me, and I wasn't going to have to think about this by myself anymore. Like it was utter selfishness, utter craziness, utter self-centeredness, and she was like insane. You were like the most sensible out of all of us, and you like got the world dropped on your head, and I was just like this total like ravenous drug addict freak, pathetic person, and then she wound up, I think moving to California.
No, she moved to Washington State, actually, to that little point in Washington State where you have to go through Canada. It's like the furthest you can get from everything in the world while you're in the United States.
She lived with me. She lived with me when I had one of the worst seizures I ever had, and she would like take me to meetings and stuff. And she lived with me when. Like I remember this so well. Like I was using it as much as I could use. I was using like hundreds of dollars a day, and I was shooting up. I think at that point, or maybe I wasn't. Maybe I wasn't shooting up. Maybe I didn't shoot up until after she had left. But and I was taking tons of pills, like tons and tons of pills. And I would have seizures when I wouldn't take the pills. And remember, I had that loft bed in that apartment, and I had a seizure on the loft bed, where I fell off of the loft bed onto my coffee table, and I had this big, thick glass bong on the coffee table, and I could have been killed, very easily. I fell right onto that, and she called 911 because I was having this total grand mal seizure, and she always would tell me this story that the cops came. And I was like, I'm not going, I'm not going, like crazy. And then the cops had to drag me out of the house, and I was holding on to the door frame, and I wouldn't leave. And then I woke up at St. Vincent's again, which is also where Nora was born.
Wow.
I woke up at St. Vincent's on a bathroom floor. And a Jamaican nurse was like, "Boy, you don't need to be acting like that, like what are you doing on the floor, kind of thing." And like I was sitting there, and all I could think when I was in that bed was, "There's still dope at home, there's still dope at home."
That's crazy.
And she was like, "No, there isn't. I threw it all away. There's nothing left." And I was like, "I know there's dope at home, and I'm gonna get it." And when I got home, I remember, because I still have the muscle memory of how I would get into the bed. I would stand on the coffee table, I would put my arms on the loft, and I would jump backwards up into the bed. And in that loft bed, there was this little alley between the mattress and the frame, and I had dope in there. And when I got home, I did the dope, and in that hospital stay was the weirdest thing. There was this lesbian woman who was, and this is going to derail this very emotional story, but it's so very weird. There was this lesbian woman who claimed to be the daughter of this famous producer, and she had a girlfriend who she said was Tracy Chapman. And it was this black woman with dreads who looked like Tracy Chapman, but she called herself Mo. It was insane. It was totally insane. Anyway, this woman, who we haven't really used her name very much, or should I just say her name?
Well, I don't know. Are you going to bleep it out later?
No. She wound up trying to get me help and like feeling very bad about what had happened, and she moved to the Pacific Northwest. And I kept trying to get clean. And I think that's when you left, too, shortly after, didn't you?
No, because I was still in medical school here. And so I was like, I went through this period, so like, yeah, this is also maybe the part, I don't know how much you know. But so then I like obviously went into this like crazy period for a little while. Like I remember I didn't eat for 3 days. I just had this like crazy feeling about everything. And I actually had this great friend in medical school who like, kind of took me by the collar and you can like lifted me up and was like, you can be sad about this. You can be like so hurt, but you need to like pass your tests and I'm going to come over and make you study. And he was the one who kept me. He actually was this guy I was in this band with. And it was like him and this band that helped me stay in medical school actually, because I was just fucked up. And anyway, so I went through this period where it was, and I remember, I don't know if like she ever told you this, but she later told me in some letter or something that she like would come in disguise because, I don't know if it was because she felt so guilty or whatever, but she would come by the medical school in disguise just to like, watch me go into medical school or something like that. Does this ring a bell?
No.
Weird stuff like
that.
But
why would she tell me that?
I don't know. Right. So there was so many weird things happening. But anyway, so then what happened with you guys at that point?
Well,
was that when you moved to California?
No. Then I just kept trying to get it together here. She was gone. I had decided, though, that because I had destroyed our friendship, that I better be with her. Like I needed to wind up with her because what was the point of it otherwise? Not to mention that I really did like her. You know what I mean? Like she, like in the end, we did something terribly fucked up, like to you, but like had me and her met outside of you, it could have been a good relationship. You know what I mean? Like we had a lot in common. Like we were very good friends. She was very smart. She was very kind. She was a good person, like she did the wrong thing. You know what I mean? And I totally did the wrong thing. But like, I can't say like she was the biggest enabler I ever had. That's for sure. Yeah. What happened to me was I wound up going to treatment and then in Florida, and I wound up moving to California and living with Todd and Jeremy, and then convincing her to move in with me in Los Angeles. And then we lived together in Los Angeles for 7 years, where she took care of me. She made sure that I ate and I slept and I had drugs and I did whatever. And my life became less and less recognizable, and I think the guilt of what had happened never left me. I talked about that every time I got straight. I would retell the story to her, and I'd be like, "How am I supposed to live with this?" And she didn't really have a good explanation for, because we had to live with what had happened.
But I think another thing to mention here is, like you were saying, she was taking care of you. Is I don't know if this is a good or not a good explanation, but I think in my relationship with her, like you were saying, I think she was really lonely and depressed, and it was clear that I wasn't.
You didn't need her like that.
Her, and you needed her more than anything. You needed her so fundamentally. You literally needed her to save your life at this point. Like like everyone was afraid you were going to die at this point or later points. Just being a heroin addict and.
My mother would always like thank her for keeping me alive. My parents really loved her because she kept me alive,
right.
And they didn't need to worry because they knew that she was watching out for me.
Right.
And she was like very much addicted to like the codependence of the whole thing. You know, she was like this crazy enabler. She also was a total enabler with Todd. Like whenever Todd needed money, she would give him money till the end, till he died.
Really?
You know, she was always like there for Todd in any situation. She never learned like I mean, not that had anything to do with Todd dying, but she was this major league enabler, and our relationship, you know, my relationship with her became one of total enabling caretaking. I was helpless, and she, you know, took care of me.
Yeah.
And we lived in California, and she worked. I would drive her to work, and I would drive, and I would go get high. Then I would drive back and pick her up, and like I would cook. You know what I mean? Like it was just like I would clean the house,
right.
would watch TV, would like wander around the neighborhood and take out of focus pictures of flowers. I was just like this big total mess.
You were a heroin house husband.
Yeah, very, very much so. I would like wear a robe all day. I was like 50 pounds overweight. I was on methadone. It was like crazy. And I think every year at some point I would call you and I would be like, I'm so sorry for what happened. You know, I'm still with her. Like somehow me being with her made it okay. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I didn't want to hurt you. That's not why this happened. It never would have happened if I wasn't on drugs. You know, like just trying to find some peace and reconciliation or whatever. And you were always like, I always love you, but I don't want to talk to you. And,
yeah,
you know.
I couldn't be friends with you. It was, yeah. And until your mom died.
Well, then that's when I started trying to get my shit together. My mom was diagnosed with leukemia, and I was on 150 milligrams of methadone, and I started kicking the methadone, and I got off the methadone, and we moved to Vermont. And I called you from Vermont, and you were still like, you had heard that my mom was.
So what year would this have been?
2007, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was just like trying to explain to you what was happening, and you know, you were like, you know, you always were happy to hear from me in the bottom of yourself, but then like 90% of you was just like, what are you fucking, leave me alone.
I just wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't ready to forgive you until I think this conversation. Well, I don't know. I just remember the conversation where you told me it must have been when you told me your mom was dying, and I remember I was sitting on my porch at the time where I was living, and I remember just maybe it was the same conversation, maybe it was the next one, but I just remember this feeling of like suddenly I was like, okay, this is now whatever 10 years in the past, 8 years in the past, this thing that happened, and like Dave's mom is dying, and like I'm far past all this stuff. You know, I'm now with this other wonderful woman who I ended up marrying, who's like the light of my life. I'm like so far past all this, and like there's so many bigger things than this. And I remember that's when I suddenly like was able to forgive you.
Right. And still though, like you weren't like so up for being my friend. And I think you also could hear how sick I still was.
Well, what I remember saying to you is like that I forgive you, and our friendship has to come from you. I have to like know because there was the like, you know, the like you stealing my girlfriend kind of thing. But then there was just like the thing that was left for me was that like, you know, whether it's because of the drugs or whatever, that you had treated me in this way that felt like the drugs are more important than me. And I knew you were still like using on and off at this point. And so I felt like I needed you to know that the friendship has to, we can redevelop our friendship, but it's got to come from you, so that I knew that you like, it was your actions were like able to like come to a friendship with, you know, where we could be back together. And that's just like the thing.
And then what happened after that?
Then I think we started talking some, not a lot.
Well, then my mother actually died.
Yeah, then she died.
And I think you realized like that the lands and after my mother died, right after my mother died, or right before my mother died, I broke up with her.
Right.
We broke up, and I left her, and I moved home. And that's when it wasn't until then that you could actually talk to me.
That's funny because I don't. I mean, maybe that's true, but I don't even remember that part of it. like the part I really remember is that your mom either was dying or died. That, like, in my mind, that was sort of the thing that triggered me.
The switch was flipped in your head.
Yeah, where like I felt like I could forgive you, and that there was bigger things here.
Right, and then I think I moved home, and my mom died. I moved home in August, and she died in November, I think.
Yeah,
and
I knew your mom so well too. It was like that. It was painful for me that your mom was dying. It was like there's so many emotions, like, in all of that.
Well, because you were very much raised by my family the way I was raised by your family.
I was over here all the time growing up, throwing paper airplanes off the terrace, throwing fiery balls of paper towels off the terrace. Sorry, Alan.
And it's just like it's such a the reason Dave is not a drug addict, obviously, and he's not a drug user. There's no like funny. I mean, he had a couple tripping stories that we decided for him not to tell, but like the fact of the matter is my drug addiction and my terrible decision making, based on me being a drug addict or based on me being a bad person or based on circumstance or whatever. It's like I think it's a story worth telling because I'm sure a lot of you guys have hurt your friends. Hurting Dave was it still is. It's very painful for me to hear the story. Obviously, Dave has this beautiful family, that maybe I saved him from having a terrible life with the other woman.
No, but that's the point. I think that Jenny and I were not meant to be together
obviously.
in the end. So it's like
things worked out the way for the best, right. But I cannot. It's hard for me to have the conversation with you whenever we have it. It hurts me because it also it fucks with the our friendship. The myth of our friendship. The victory is that you and I. We went through a lot, but I know how much you love me. We're still incredibly close friends, and you know that I'm myself again, and I can be trusted, right? Yeah,
but I think it's also worth telling the Dopey Nation. I mean, it was 2 days ago. I was over at Dave's house, and to be over there and be with Dave and his family, with Linda and his 2 kids, and it's just it's like you went from being this drug addict who ripped me apart to being this happy man who's doing great now, and we're able to be such close friends. And I think if you were still an addict, even if I had forgiven you and the thing, after your mom died and all that, I don't think we would be great friends right now. If you were an addict, there'd still be love there, but it just you wouldn't be able to have done what I asked you to do, which was to make the effort and to bring it back to our friendship.
And I did do that because my friendship with Dave was always so important to me. And when we had lost, it sounds dramatic, but I had really lost a piece of myself. I betrayed you, but I betrayed myself so badly, that I could be this person that harms you. And all you want from your friend is loyalty and to be a stand-up person and to not fuck your girlfriend, to not stab you in the back, to not, and I did the opposite, and you were the best of us, out of our friends. Dave was just the sweetest, the most moral, the person who did what he said he was going to do, way more than, we were all pretty good, but you weren't late. You didn't say
I was definitely late.
You know what I mean? You didn't say you were going to do something and not do it. You were, out of all of us, you were the most morally upright, and for me to betray you, it was just the worst thing. You know what I mean? It was the worst thing. So I find that in my recovery, the promise in your recovery is you get to have a life beyond your wildest dreams. And I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. And having you as my friend again is a big piece of that, because I know that we earned it, and that being sober, it lets me be myself, who I was when we became friends in the first place. I got to come back to myself, and you were still you. And it's oh yeah, you know what I mean? And that's a very beautiful thing.
It is, and it makes me so happy. I lost you, and I was I lost you in that way of what happened, but I was I said, I was scared you were going to die, and I feel so happy that I got you back as a person, as a friend, and all this stuff. I mean, this is traumatic to even talk about, and it's so heavy, but it's like it's now long in the past, and now we're good friends again, and I'm just so happy that you're back. I feel like you're back, and you're like, and you're happy, and that's what's important now.
Well, it's true, and I am happy, and I am back, and what it is it's like, what it is, the weirdest thing about recovery to me, for me on a personal level, is that it reminds me of what I was like when we were 10.
Right.
When like you're most you. You know what I mean? And I find that that's like the best gift of my recovery is to be who I like to be. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like, I mean, just the fact that you could forgive me, you know what I mean? Like part of 12 steps is to make amends. And I've made amends. Like I've actually made an official amends, but I also like have lived in amends with you where like it's, I practice it, and like, even though we are healed and friends and all this stuff, I know what I did, and I know, and it lives with me. You know what I mean? It's not, it's over. You know what I mean? And I, like Dave would like come to town. And he'd be like, "I'll see you at so and so, but I'm not going to your house." Or he'd be like, "I don't know if I'll see you. I'm seeing this guy." He would like, "I'm seeing this guy this day. I'm seeing this guy this day. Maybe we could do this, but I'm not. We're not doing this."
Yeah. I was still,
I'm not faulting you. Yeah. I'm saying like this trip, he actually came to our house. He slept over. It was like old times. Yeah. And we haven't done that in a million years, and that's just it's fucking great.
Yeah, it was great.
And that's a real. It's the next. It's like finally, it's such a long trip back, but we're finally arriving.
Almost
there.
20 years, right? Like since this happened.
Yeah, it's basically 20 years.
Yeah.
It's 20 years since it happened.
Yeah.
And our group of friends was constant and ever constant. Yeah. And like, I remember Dave got married and he didn't invite me to the wedding.
That's not true.
At the last second, you invited me to the wedding,
but you didn't come.
That's because I was like, it was too heavy. Do you know what I'm saying? It was so you didn't like send me an invitation. You were like, if you want to come, you can come.
Really?
And I was like, I don't know if I should go. And I didn't go.
But you did come to Robbie's wedding, which was my wedding was 2011. Robbie's was like 2013 or something. And were you clean when you came?
I was totally clean.
You know what you told me? You said, I can't come to your wedding because I'm still using.
Yeah.
And I actually kind of appreciated that. Like, I felt
that's what I said.
That was upfront. It was honest. And it was like.
It was 2011.
Okay.
That was when I was like at my worst.
Yeah.
That was when Nora was a baby. I was manager at the restaurant. I was using $300 to $400 of dope a day.
Right.
I was a fucking nightmare.
Right.
And I couldn't do anything. And when I went to Robbie's wedding, like I was totally sober for the first time ever. You remember?
Right.
I was like,
I do, and it was like a crazy thing.
Because it's like you're like, who is this guy? Because you hadn't seen me.
I remember this guy from 20 years ago.
But it was like that.
Yeah,
it was really like that.
Yeah.
And that was the first. And we had such a good time. And it was the first time we had hung out like where I was totally sober.
Yeah, like
since then.
You and Jim and Dev stayed at my house. And it was super fun.
And it was weird, right? It was so weird to have me back.
It was. It was like the old school Dave. You got banned from the local coffee shop.
Tell that story.
So there's this coffee shop called a Muddy Cup
in Seattle. Don't buy coffee at a Muddy Cup in Seattle.
I'll
tell you. You fill in what I don't know. Okay. Every morning I get up at the fucking crack of dawn. I've always done this my whole life, and I didn't want to like make noise and try to make coffee in your house. I don't know what I was thinking. I just wanted to get out, in the early morning. So at like 6 a.m, I would get up and I would leave the house and I would wander down to the Muddy Cup and I would buy like a big cup of coffee and I would take a shit in their coffee cups, And then I did this like for 3 days in a row, I think. And I don't know what happened. I think I asked for a refill. Or maybe I went to use the.
No, it was the guy was like, this is for bathrooms for customers only, and you hadn't bought your coffee yet. I think.
Yeah. And I said, I'm going to buy a coffee. I said, what are you, a fascist? And he said, what? And I said, well, what kind of fascist? I'm going to buy the fucking coffee after I go to the bathroom. And he was like, you're banned. And like, he wouldn't sell me another cup of coffee.
Wasn't there something like his girlfriend, then she was going to get it for you or something?
Yeah, I was hanging around.
And then he thought you were flirting with her or something.
Which is also possible. Yeah. Trying to dope fiend a cup of coffee out of them after they had banned me.
Yeah.
I don't know that I was flirting with. I was not flirting with his girlfriend. I was fighting with them. But I thought it was funny. In New York, you can have that fight and you're the best of friends. In Seattle, you get shut down and banned.
Yeah.
You know?
So Dave started a smear campaign on Facebook. Boycott Muddy Cup.
I'll continue that on Dopey. What neighborhood is that?
It's in Wallingford.
In Wallingford, Washington. If there's any listeners out there, just know that the Muddy Cup is a fascist institution that does not want addicts to use their bathroom.
Oh, man.
And I think it's very cool that you would come on the show. I like that.
Can we leave things with one more funny story, just because it was
another funny
heavy?
story?
Well, it's not a drug story, but the Katz's story.
All right,
Can we tell that?
Yeah.
All right. So this is now going back. So you have to sandwich the heavy thing between some lighthearted stuff. So summer after senior year in high school, I tried to get this weird job, and Davey and he started coming to this weird job, and we were handing out flyers, and we didn't get paid anything for 3 weeks, and that was
It was his job. Tell him the story.
Okay, I'll tell that story, and then it'll lead into the other part. So this was back before the internet. So like you look in the New York Times in the Help Wanted section, and there was this thing that said, this ad that said, make $400 a week, which was a lot of money back then for a high school student. Come to such and such an address. So I went down there. I was this high school kid, and all they asked me, it was in this weird warehouse.
But it was fucking 1991. It was like New York was fucking crime ridden and crazy.
It was crazy. It was
on the west side.
It was like 11th Avenue
and 29th Street.
29th, yeah. And there was prostitutes all over the street when I showed up,
and it was filthy. And these were old warehouses, and.
Think about like a scene from some old like 70s like mafia movie. Like you walk into the dingy old warehouse and it's dark in there. And,
disgusting.
And there's a guy sits me down. No one used their last names, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm Peter. Can you work 7 to 4 every day of the week?" And I was like, yeah, I think so. And he's like, "Great, you're hired." And that was the interview. And then so they had me like handing out these flyers all day. And then I was like, "Dave, you should come. This great job. You just hand out flyers and you make $400 a week." Of course, I hadn't been paid yet.
But I loved handing out flyers.
Yeah. So Dave's like, "I'm in." So Dave starts doing this job with me. You fill out these flyers and like
it was like bootleg items from like As Seen on TV. Like at the time, like there was something called a club that you would put on your steering wheel so you couldn't steal the car. And they had a fake one called the Lock. Yeah. They had just
with
bullshit.
The two like Haagen-Dazs dots over the O.
L-O-K or something. Yeah. They just had bullshit, shitty, fucking Chinese knockoff TV products. And like we were in the subways handing out these flyers, and they were like, "We're going to give you a commission based on what these people sell, and you should know that only minorities order these items. So
racist.
Only hand out the flyers to minority people." And like we just thought it was so weird and funny.
We thought it was weird and funny. Like everything we did back then was to try and have funny stories.
Yeah.
And like you had to write your operator number so that you would supposedly get paid based on that. So we'd make up these weird songs like, "Grab a flyer and have some fun from operator 661. Whoa. We were into dance hall at the time. Anyway, so we're doing this. We end up mostly just going to Dave's house, watching 21 Jump Street and playing video games and going back to sleep. But then, so we try and get paid. They don't pay us anything. I finally got $80 out of them for 3 weeks. So then we're like, all right, we need some other scheme, because we were always trying to scheme something. So Davey's like, "Well, my uncle is part owner.
My cousin.
Your cousin is part owner of Katz's. Maybe we come up with this whole scheme of how we're going to do a delivery service for Katz's, because everyone in Midtown would love to have like a pastrami sandwich for lunch." It seemed like such a brilliant scheme at the time. So we
It could have worked.
It could have.
We just didn't do any work for them.
So no, actually we did. We took the menu and we made some to-go menu or something. We presented to him, I remember, and he was like, "Look, you can try I'll pay you on commission for anything you sell, and I'll give you a free lunch every day and a token for the subway for getting up to Midtown. So we're like, great, okay, done. And so we're like, go up to Midtown, walking around office buildings and try to schmooze with the office.
We didn't try hard at it.
We didn't try hard at all. We would like end up in these weird deserted office buildings.
And we'd like leave a stack of flyers.
Yeah, and we would like look out the window of the top floor, and it was fun. And, it's like the greatest thing as kids. And,
but you have to understand that after this job, I got a billion jobs handing out flyers for people.
That's so
like
funny.
It became what I would do. And the mantra that every person says when they give you a job handing out flyers is they say, all right, just do your best and don't throw them down the sewer. They say everybody who ever has you handing out flyers says that. Just don't throw them down the sewer.
Which is what we did back then.
And well, with Katz's, I think we just would leave stacks of the flyers in these abandoned offices. Is what we would do.
So this led to I remember the first day, and Jimmy was it was the three of us, and was Tom Hughes with us maybe. And
if Tom Hughes is out there, there's a friend of mine who I lost years ago, and he's just gone. If you guys know a guitar player named Tom Hughes, write the dopeypodcast@gmail.com.
Super sweet guy. So anyway, we're getting our free lunch the first day, and so we get in line, and there's the pastrami cutters and everything, and you look on the menu, and obviously like there's all sorts of stuff on the menu. So Dave and I, of course,
being New York City Jewish people,
we get a pastrami on rye with mustard with pickles on the side. And and the guy, and this is before the last Jewish waiter. This was like really the old school persnickety Jewish waiters back then. And
they were Jewish meat cutters back then.
The meat cutters, yeah. This guy was probably 70 years old, and like he kind of looks at us and gives us like a grunt and like a knowing nod, like, okay, you kids know what to do. Then Jimmy comes up. He's looking at the menu and he's like, "Can I have turkey and Swiss cheese on whole wheat with mayonnaise?" And he looks down at the guy. He's got the meat cutter, the old Jewish meat cutter. He's got his arms crossed, just staring at him with this like sneer. And there's this pause, and Jim is staring back at him, and then the guy just goes, "Fuck you." And he didn't give him the sandwich. That was it.
Did Jim get a sandwich?
No, he got a pastrami in the end.
Well, that's what Katz is like.
Yeah.
Let's do. Now, I apologize to the Dopey Nation if you didn't find this episode dopey enough, but let's play a Dopey voicemail, shall we?
Yeah.
This is hardcore Dopey listener, Hot Wheels, who's actually a quadriplegic.
Really?
Yeah. So maybe you could help him out.
I work with disabled people.
I know. So he just sent this to me yesterday, and here he is. He's a Dopey super fan, this guy. Hold on.
I should have said a person with a disability, not a disabled person.
Thank you, politically correct police. Hold on. And this is Hot Wheels. Dopey Nation. Stay strong. Hold on.
What's up, Dopey Nation? Dave, Colleen, Gabby, the church, congregation, everybody. Figured I'd leave a little quick voicemail here, maybe doping things up a little. Circle back to like 1999. Me and my buddy are going to the city to cop some heroin. And I don't know about everybody else, but personally, I like to get as high as I could on some other shit before I did my heroin. Crack, coke, whatever. It just made the dope that much better. In Chicago, a lot of times you couldn't score the same stuff at the same spot. So you'd go to the crack spot and go around the corner to the dope spot. So me and my buddy, we'll call him John, we went and scored some crack real quick, and we're about to go, to the corner where they got the dope at, and had to pull back on the main street, and as soon as we did, there's our pasty white faces in a very colorful neighborhood that we did not belong in. And we got rolled. They like to do this nice thing, the police, to big people. Before I broke my neck, I was about 6'3", 230, and for my protection, they like to rip you out of cars, handcuff you, and throw your face down on the curb for your protection. Now, as the sherries were freaking, going in the rearview mirror, my buddy goes, "Here, swallow these." Since I didn't pay for anything, the least I could do was swallow the shit. So I threw them in my mouth, picked up the fucking cup. There's no water in it. and the cops are already walking to the car. So I just raw dogged it and swallowed like 6 blows and 4 rocks. They didn't go down. They got stuck in the back of my throat. But it was good enough for me as long as I didn't puke. And I was the passenger in the car, so I didn't figure they'd fuck with me too much. There was no drugs in the car because I just ate them all. So, I'll try to shorten it up a little. So they finally get to me, and they're asking me a bunch of questions. What are you doing in this neighborhood? And as it appears, like, hey, we're going to get off because there's no drugs. They didn't find shit. And I couldn't help but crack this smile because fucking, dude, there's a bunch of crack and heroin in my throat. Like, I'm answering the questions, like, what's your name? Yeah, I said that on purpose so you couldn't get my full name. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't. And we got back in the car. They didn't find shit and let us go. And that was all the money. And my buddy's like, damn, man, you're fucked. We're going to be sick in like a half hour. And I'm still laughing because the cop looked at me in the face and goes, what's so funny? And I just smiled and, you'll never get it. You're never going to get it. In the back of my mind, dude, this shit's coming right the fuck out. So we get in the car, and my buddy's all depressed. He's like, damn, that was our $100, dude. We're going to be dope sick in an hour. I just smiled. Can I see your hand for a second? He's looking at me all stupid, and I open my mouth, and bam, everything right there in his hand. Just like a fucking Pez dispenser, man. We were fucking smoking the crack and banging dope before the cops were even in their car and pulled away because we knew they weren't coming back to search a car. They already searched 3 times. How's that for a dopey story? Don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. Okay? Stay strong, Dopey Nation. Toodles.
I have to say that's a perfect Dopey story. It's like, it's short, it's funny, it's to the point. He's victorious at the end. Although it's like, it's weird being a person in recovery and hearing the end of the story where he gets to regurgitate the crack and the heroin and use them. And I'm so happy for him.
Really?
Like, yeah, I'm thrilled for him.
Yeah.
You know, like whenever something goes wrong and you're out there and like, if you have a habit and you're fucked. Right. You know what I mean? Like if you like, because you have your whole world set on this thing.
Yeah.
Like it's like being sick, being in withdrawal. When you get to put the substance back into you, you get to be well.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like getting sick and then like healing and stuff. It's instantaneous wellness. I mean, it's like drug addiction is a terrible thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I love that story, and I love that it's short and sweet. I feel guilty that I've been such a fucking fascist about short voicemails. I've been a fascist about short voicemails lately. But Hot Wheels fucking came through with a nice shorty. Everybody send in a voicemail. Send in an email. Thank you for listening. Did you enjoy being on the show?
I did.
What do you think about the show? You listen to the show from time to time.
Yeah, I do.
Did you ever listen to some serious dopey ones?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I listened, I listened sporadically, but I listened from the beginning, and the arc of what the show has, like, as a listener for me, and you guys now all know this crazy story that we talked about today, but the first couple episodes were really hard for me. It was a little like PTSD-like, because it felt like it was more like, it was like going into the world of the debaucherous drug stories at first, and less on the recovery side. And so it brought back the feeling of like, well, Dave's reveling in these good old days kind of thing.
Was that what you would hear?
Yeah, that was my personal experience because of what happened with us. And then as I listened, and for a little while I was like, yeah, I don't really want to listen to this. And then as I listened to some later episodes, even before Chris died, like it became, and as you guys talked a lot about more the recovery side, I liked it a lot more, and it was easier for me to listen to it. And and the drug stories are interesting. I mean, I treat a lot of people who have chronic pain, who have drug addiction, and like to get insight into the world of.
Well, when you would treat them, would you think about me and the story and everything you knew about it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And then like the fact that like it seems like you're really helping people who are maybe teetering on that line between addiction and recovery, who need a little push over to the side of like seeing how to get over there into the recovery world. So that's
the show. The show wasn't designed to help anybody.
I know.
The show was designed for us to have fun, but the only and right before Chris died, I was always trying to boil down the message of the show because I thought it was important to have a message of the show.
Yeah.
And before Chris died, the message was a heroin addict can recover and you can have fun in your recovery.
Right.
That was the point. And you can even have fun telling fucked up Dopey stories.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And like, it's fine if you guys want to get high too. I'm just saying, for me, I have more fun being clean. I have way less worries. I had so many worries. Like, getting clean is so hard. Early recovery is so hard. And I still have problems. Like, I have problems today.
Yeah.
I have problems. But my life is so much better because I don't have a constant, incredible weight on my head from using.
Yeah.
Here, you want to read a little Jewish Dopey email?
Sure.
Don't say his last name.
Okay, I won't.
Or maybe don't say his name at all.
Okay. But
can you read it? Your vision's no good
turn it
anymore.
A little more. I'm getting a little old here, Dave. Okay. Dear Dave, so glad you have kept Dopey alive even with Chris being gone. I listen to Dopey almost every day and eagerly await the newest episode each week. I literally feel the dopamine flowing when Apple alerts me of a new episode. I just celebrated 2 years sober, congratulations, on December 26th. I can't believe after 13 years of binge drinking, smoking weed, and shoveling massive amounts of pills into my mouth on a nearly daily basis, which led to 2 overdoses, I'm finally off it all and honestly barely miss it. I'm so much happier being in recovery, and Dopey has been a big part of it. I'm also Jewish and was raised Orthodox. Wow, fascinating. Raised Orthodox.
Yes.
I still practice a little bit, but not nearly to a level where I could be called super religious. So maybe this person is just Jew-ish.
Jew-y. I think we're Jewish. He's Jew-y.
Okay. I think it's shameful that more people in the Jewish community are not aware that so many of us have this disease. The chosen are not immune. The chosen being in quotation.
The chosen.
The chosen. People like you, Amy Dresner, and Mark Maron are my heroes.
Nice.
The last interview you did with Amy was so fantastic that I immediately bought a copy of My Fair Junkie. That's Amy's book.
Yes.
Yeah. I also really enjoyed reading drug memoirs. The first drug memoir I ever read was written by my great aunt. Should I read the name of this person?
Yeah.
Okay. Flory Fisher, entitled, quote, The Lonely Trip Back. She spent 15 years... Do you know that book?
No.
Oh, maybe you should read it.
Maybe I should.
She spent 15 years as an...
Maybe you should read it.
Maybe I should read it. She spent 15 years as an IV heroin addict and a prostitute until finally getting clean and devoting the rest of her life to carrying the message. The show, quote, Strangers with Candy...
You know that show?
No, I don't.
It was a funny show on Comedy Central.
Oh, like pretty recently?
Like 20 years ago.
Okay. Is loosely based on her. Did you know that?
I know it from the email.
Oh, okay. You've read this already?
Yes.
I got it. The people at Comedy Central saw a video of a talk she was giving.
She's crazy. You should check out. It's actually, David Sedaris.
Yeah.
His sister plays the character from Strangers with Candy, Amy Sedaris, and it's like very wacky. I never liked the show, but like my friend, Brad came up with Dopey. People in the Dopey Nation have been talking about. My friend Brad came up with Dopey, and I kind of stole it from him and didn't tell him until after we had started doing it.
How does he feel about that?
He knew that he couldn't do Dopey. He wasn't even a drug addict.
Right.
But Brad loved Amy Sedaris.
Okay.
Anyway, continue.
Has Brad been on the show?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Say hi to Brad.
Hi, Brad.
Hey, Brad.
How you doing?
He can't answer you.
Okay. Where was I? The people at Comedy Central saw a video of a talk she was giving to high school kids in the 60s. They thought her witty, tough Brooklyn Jewish persona was so funny it inspired the fictional character Jerry Blank. Blank. Of course, my great uncle found the show to be insulting and cried because to him it seemed like the show was mocking his sister's tragic life. Anyway, thought you might find that all interesting. Keep up the good work, man, and much love. # Stay Strong Dopey Nation. Sent from my iPhone.
Yes, thank you. And that's from Moisha.
Moisha?
Yeah. Which I like the name Moishe.
Moishe, congratulations again on
your
2
time.
years. Yeah.
Now you want to hear something fucked up, something that bothered me?
Yeah.
Before we go, I'm just going to say this thing that bothered me. Yeah. And please, you guys, if you're listening and you think that this episode wasn't dopey enough, I don't blame you. It wasn't that dopey, but it's a fucking fucked up story, and it's a beautiful story of friendship prevailing when addiction and bad decisions destroy it.
Yeah.
Now check this out. Now, many of you guys are in something called, do you know what Reddit is?
Yeah, sort of.
It's like something. It's some weird computer place where people talk about stuff.
Right.
And Dopey has a place in Reddit thanks to Cormac, so big shout out to Cormac. We're waiting for your song about Dopey. Hope you're doing good. He set up the Reddit page, and the Reddit people are some of the most like anti-Dopey fans. They're hardcore, but they kind of like say weird stuff and tell me what to do a bit. So this guy writes, "You're doing a great job on your own, Dave, but never, capital Never, take Chris out of the show. I think at the end of each episode, you should play Forever in Debt because Chris, capital Loved, loved when you play that song." And then
That's the song you wrote, Forever in Debt?
And then have a clip of Chris at the end of every episode saying toodles.
What do you think about that idea?
Fuck that, I'm not doing that. You know, it's like, listen, I love Chris. I fucking love Chris.
Yeah.
I hate that Chris is dead.
Yeah.
But I will not play I hate it when Chris said toodles.
But don't you say toodles?
I say fucking toodles for Chris.
Right.
Because Chris died, I have to say fucking toodles.
Yeah.
Because he died. When he would say it, I didn't like it. And now I have to say it because it's his legacy.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's actually a nice thing. I think it's interesting. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's a nice idea, but I feel like you have a lot of. I mean, obviously you're devastated by Chris's death, but you're angry about it too. You have so many emotions surrounding it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, as just a Dopey listener and now being on it once, I think it's a nice idea.
You think I should play Chris saying toodles at the end of every episode?
It's an interesting idea.
But this is the thing.
Yeah.
Then it's like you're gonna play. What are you going to do? You're going to go back to each episode and take a toodles and play it on each episode?
No, you take one toodles clip.
And you have the same one every time? That's terrible.
Well, that would be the only way you could do it.
It's terrible. And then you're stuck with it.
But so when you say it or you have a guest say toodles.
I say it.
You say it.
I say it.
And
I say fucking toodles for Chris.
Right, and what's the emotion surrounding that?
Anger, sadness, gravitas.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an emotion. You know, I feel bad, but I also loyalty.
Yeah.
You know, pride in our show. I feel a lot of stuff when I say toodles
I think
for
the most
Chris.
important thing is just you say what you feel about Chris. And like, you know, I never met Chris, but I still feel sad that he died. And that's the more important thing, that you just said what you feel. And
I obviously feel sad.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like, I obviously feel sad that Chris died.
I know. I mean, I remember.
I'm annoyed that you think I should play the toodles clip.
Listen, I just told you what I really think, that what's meaningful is what you just said.
But you
about
think
how
I should
feel.
do it Do you think I'm a dick because I don't want to do it?
No.
Are you sure?
That's not what I said. I thought it's a nice idea. That doesn't mean
So you're not saying you think I'm a dick because I don't want to do it?
I'm not saying that.
Anyway, thank you for writing on Reddit. I think his name was Tito Weedo on Reddit. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think? You think I should play a recording of Chris saying toodles at the end of every episode?
I mean, I also know you love playing songs, so that part I'm surprised you're not going to do.
Well, we play another thing is that Chris, on the episode before he died, the last episode, Chris said, "I want every episode to start with that blurb from If I'm Not Home, I'm Out Walking Around, and I want every episode to end with Good So Bad."
Ah, so that's a no-brainer then. You leave that alone.
Listen,
right? That's how you end the episodes.
Yeah. It just I do it because it's, you know, and I say this, you know, tongue in cheek, and I say it really. It was his dying fucking wish.
Yeah. No.
You know.
No. That's what you should do then.
And Chris was not like a stickler for organization, but he was a little bit OCD, and he really believed that Dopey would be more successful if it followed a formula. You know. Sometimes I'll put a little opening in front of the show.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I'll put another song.
Right.
Like I always want to put Led Zeppelin Good Times, Bad Times for some reason because there's so much energy to it.
Yeah.
I think I might do that for this episode.
Yeah. But don't you... I've heard some other songs like Dopey listeners have written in, or is that what it is? Yeah.
And I would love for you guys to send in music, send in art. That's my favorite stuff.
I like hearing that stuff when I'm listening.
Everybody likes it.
Yeah, it's great.
Everybody likes it.
And there's some great songs, actually. I've heard some good stuff on there.
There's some great stuff out there.
Yeah.
I totally agree. We had the Dopey Nation theme song contest that didn't go anywhere. But that's
really
where a lot of them...
Who's that guy who did a version of Good So Bad, a banjo version?
Oh, yeah, Jake in West Virginia.
Jake, man, I really dug that. I was feeling that.
Everybody loved that.
Nice one.
Hey, Jake, and he was supposed to send in a new Dopey song, too.
Jake
be slapping. Jake be slacking.
Jake, that's his name, or you're saying?
No, I'm saying that Jake be slacking.
Okay.
Yes.
Jake, come on, man. Send in another tune. I want to hear it.
Send in another tune. Anyway, I think that's the show. You want to say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah.
Do you want to say the end thing, or you don't want to say the end thing?
Well, I'm happy to say Dopey Nation, stay strong.
Stay strong.
Stay strong, Dopey Nation. Either way, just stay strong, all of you. And you know, like, for those of you who are on that line, man, get to recovery if you can. I don't know.
What do you know about it?
I don't. Well, I know from you.
You just want to see people do well.
I want to see people do well.
Me too. I do too.
And
not to mention,
and it's tough out there. I know it's tough out there these days.
It's more than tough. If you do dope, you might just die because it's fucking fentanyl.
So many people are dying. And fentanyl has fucked everybody. You know,
Todd probably sniffed a bag and died.
Yeah.
I think Chris did considerably more when he died, but I bet Todd sniffed a bag and fucking died.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's my duty as a doctor, to want people to be well. That sounds cheesy, but
all right.
Anyway, I'm wishing you all the best. That's the bottom line.
So stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris. So I've changed my mind, and I'm going to give in to Tito Guido's request. 1, 2, 3, forever in debt. Building standing set, standing their ground to defend against the rest. We're all at odds. Don't forget your bets. From the roof I yell, you hardly break a sweat. Sabotage is no longer camouflage. Almost in the open, so you better quit your job. Can't say it looks too good. Could be a mirage pointed at your head. I think it's time to dodge. And I haven't paid my rent, and my money's all but spent. Plan to take it over, but I haven't made a dent. I lost some folks I used to call my friends. They'll all be back when I'm on my feet again. But sabotage is no longer camouflage. Almost in the open, so you better quit your jobs. Can't say it looks too good. It could be a mirage pointed at your head. I think it's time to dodge. Forever's a long time to pay that kind of price. Might think you saw it coming. It could have just been the northern lights. And a long time away is an hour from when. I don't remember when it started, Thursday or Friday, or then again it could have been forever in debt. Building standing set, I'm back to the beginning, got no time to second guess. And yes, I'm easily impressed, the ways you do confess. Control the situations by the moves inside your dress. But I gotta go, got nothing left to say. What time is the show? I can't anyone say. I gotta go, got no more time today. Tomorrow is a long, long time from today. Tomorrow is a long, long time from today. Tomorrow is a long, long time from today.
Okay.
And write a review.
And stay strong.
And send a voicemail to dopeypodcast@gmail.com.
Alrighty.
Don't be a stranger. What are you rushing out of here for?
I'm not.
Where are you going to go?
I go nowhere.
You want to go to the Comedy Cellar and see if Artie's there?
Let's do that.
Do you want to do that?
Maybe. I don't know. All right. Toodles.
I want to take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And I want to take a ride up in the sky. What does
airplane just passed me by. And I want to see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And my shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. Shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. And I wonder would they pay it any mind when I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it winds, because peace and love are very, very, very hard to find. And I want to be good so bad. Want to be good so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. Damn it, all these suckers make me mad. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And these suckers make me mad. I know